Hi, I'm Christopher Warnock of Renaissance Astrology, and today I'm going to talk about practical tips for working with astrological talismans. But before we get into the practical stuff, we really need to talk about, what is a talisman and how does it work? Because everybody's already got an understanding of what it is. I mean, they're dealing with talismans. Most of the time, these assumptions are unconscious, though. And so that, it automatically makes sense. We don't know why. We don't even think about it. We just automatically do something because it fits our unconscious assumptions. So the first thing we got to do is to see what our unconscious assumptions are. I mean, as I said, what is a talisman and how does it work? So anytime we're doing anything in the modern era, we're going to have to deal with the underlying modern worldview of atheistic materialism, which is that only matter and energy are real. And so the problem with atheistic materialism as a basis for doing magic is obviously it doesn't make any sense. I mean, magic isn't real. Anything spiritual is not real. It's not matter and energy. Therefore, it's an illusion. It's fake. It's fraud. It's insane. So what we actually have is a situation where people are going on thinking, oh, I'm spiritual, but if you press them on it, in fact, they have an atheistic material approach that's unconscious. So they're assuming that everything basically is going to have an energetic or material causality. And what we end up having to do is if you ask somebody, they're not even know what worldview is, and if you ask people doing magic or astrology or whatever, they're going to say, oh, I'm spiritual because spiritual is good. Not to be spiritual is bad. I'm not bad, so therefore I must be spiritual. I mean, that's the logic of it, as opposed to any understanding of where they're actually coming from. So again, so that what that means is the standard approaches to how magic works are either they work for a talisman, either that they work through the material of the talisman. The material of the talisman itself is magical, or there's some kind of energy involved. And really, the predominant model that that I encounter with people with talismans is that the talisman is a type of battery, and it's charged with some kind of energy. And so what that means is the charge is going to run out every so often. It needs to be recharged. And ultimately, the focus, though, is on the talisman. Like I said, either the material of the talisman or the talisman as a container of the energy. And that's really what you've got to worry about. The magic comes from the talisman. And if you want magic, you need to get that particular talisman, and it works through the material and energy focused in that talisman. So again, following from that, it makes sense that you need to wear the talisman. I mean, this is what I hear, and you got to wear it all the time. You got to wear it next to your skin. And I'm not exactly sure what the thought process is there, but everybody knows this, and I'm constantly having people ask me about that. I think it has to do with the fact that it's, like I said, radiating energy. So you need to have it close to you. You need to wear it, and you need to be doing something with it. I used to have mirrors, and people say, "What do you do with it?" Well, what are you doing with a talisman? I guess if you had a talisman that was in the shape of a shovel, you would dig. So that would be how you'd use it. But again, this is the sort of, no one's really thinking about this stuff, but everybody's, that's what they're following in terms of how they deal with it. So you follow on from that. You don't want to let anyone touch the talisman because it'll mess with the energy. You don't let anyone see the talisman. That'll mess with the energy too somehow. I had somebody even ask me about, could I have a radio on nearby, and that would somehow block it? Because again, it's got some kind of radio waves or energy or something, and it's scientific. Absolutely not. There's zero scientific evidence for magic or astrology, and if you gave it to a scientist, they could test it and say there's nothing to this whatsoever. And I would agree with that from the that there's nothing material and nothing energetic from the causality. So what I would say about this is that we're kind of all enmeshed in atheistic materialism. I mean, everybody is, and you just kind of, that's the sort of the ocean that we swim in as the sort of like as fish. We can't even see it. And what I would say about it is that the alternative approaches, I'm not saying that they're right, that everybody has to follow this and everyone else is wrong. I'm not even saying it's better. I just want to put it out there that there's an alternative approach. And really what I'd like to focus on is being conscious of the approach that you're following. Again, and if you're like, I'm going to do the atheistic materialism, it's energy of some kind, that's what I'm going to go with, and I understand where that comes from, that's great. But I think that a lot of times if you really think about it and confront it, you're going to recognize that it's really not going to be, it's certainly not scientific energy. It's some kind of spiritual energy that's like scientific energy, but it's not detectable. Again, that's the approach a lot of people take. My sense of that is it's coming from atheistic materialism. And that's what really the attraction there is, not because it really makes sense as a model, but because it's attractive to, and not having to step too far away from an atheistic materialistic approach. Traditionally, there's a couple other different possible approaches. I mean, again, the rays stuff is in there, but the rays is not a scientific energy approach. I mean, energy as a terminology, as a concept, really didn't come into play until the 19th century. When you look at someone like Al-Kindi, who's a medieval Arabic astrologer, he wrote a book called On the Stellar Rays. These rays are light rays. That's their model for that. And their view of light rays is really not a material, so material as it is spiritual. There's this whole sense of consciousness as being a ray. There's a whole sense of living and awareness as a ray. And so this is very, very different from the scientific rays. And the fact that they're similar or the words are the same, it allows people to kind of slop into thinking, okay, this is some kind of quasi-scientific approach. So, but definitely the ray stuff in terms of, like I said, rays of light is a possible answer for that. Another approach for causality is occult virtue. So occult virtue basically means hidden powers. And rather than being elemental, air, fire, and water powers, or hot, dry, cold, and wet, these are hidden. And so essentially what they are manifestations of Platonic ideas. And ultimately, when you're talking about something having a particular occult virtue, really it's a manifestation of that particular Platonic idea. And it's connected, and not even connected, but actually is everything that's that's manifestation of that Platonic idea, whether it's in a material object, whether it's a form, an image, a ratio, a mathematical formula, and also material objects, whether it appears in the celestials, whether it appears in the anima mundi, whether it appears again, as a Platonic idea, or then unified in the one, they are all unified. They're really all the one thing. So there's really even ultimately not a sense of separation there. So that's a type of spiritual causality. Another way of thinking about it is direct causality by spirits and angels. So these are really what's found in our traditional sources. And they're giving us alternative models and alternative ways to approach it. And the key with the model is how useful is it? Is it an accurate model of the reality, that the piece of reality it's looking at? Can you use it and predict accurately? Can you use it and get results? If so, it's a good model. If you're always being surprised, if things are not going the way they should be going, then your model needs to be changed. It's not a problem with reality that doesn't conform to your model. You need to conform your model to reality. And reality is so complex that any one particular model is never going to be an accurate map 100% of the time. So this kind of leads into the fact that, again, my approach is what I call a devotional approach. And I'm going to talk about basically the underlying sort of worldview and methodology with that, and then how that plays itself out just in practice, and how to, in a very practical way, how you deal with talismans. So the devotional practice, again, is essentially, you could think of it as occult virtue, but also really direct causality by the spirits and angels. That's probably the best kind of summing up of what the devotional approach is. And so the talisman is not a battery. It's not just this sort of dead repository of this impersonal energy, but is a means of contact. And so the magic is not coming from the talisman, it's really coming from the spirits ultimately, or the celestial angels, however you want to think about that. So one way to think about it is the talisman is ensouled by the spirit. And it's interesting, in Shinto, the Japanese sort of the animistic religion, that's sort of their original folk religion, they have what are called bunrei, which are divided spirits. So, you'd go to a shrine, say of Inari, who has the fox guardians, who's a sort of plenty, and you can get your own spirit. They do a ceremony, and they'll give you a spirit from the shrine, and you take it back, and you can have your kamidana. You can see I have a kamidana right above my head there. That's a kamidana. Or you could have a whole shrine building that you have the spirit in. And so the spirits are connected, and in a sense they're the same spirit. Also in a sense they're a different spirit because of their location. So it's a very interesting sort of paradox, is that it's Inari wherever you have Inari shrines, or where you have the Ofuda that's got the divided spirit, or you can think of them as separated, or you can think of them as the same. But ultimately there's a unity there And I think that's a good, analogy to what's going on with talismans. Another way of looking at the talisman is like you think of as like a portal or even a cell phone. It's a direct and high intensity way of having an interaction with the celestial angels. Um, Obviously this sort of portal is useful for communication. You can ask for stuff. But again, with the devotional approach, you're really more focused on using the talisman as a means of first establishing contact and then maintaining a relationship, a positive, friendly relationship, and a long-term relationship with the celestial angel of the talisman. And obviously it's not necessary to go through the talisman to do that. You can do low intensity things like daily planetary practice or regular fixed star practice, planetary charity. These are all ways of also of having a relationship. Not as high intensity though. The talisman is going to be made at a time when that particular spirit, is very strong. Like I said, for a sun talisman, you'd want to have, or a planetary talisman, like I said, a sun talisman is a good example of that. You want to have the sun in Leo or Aries, where it's very strong in essential dignity, rising or culminating, where it's very strong in terms of placement, accidental dignity. I'm going to have the planetary hour of the sun, and then have the sun non-afflicted. So that the timing when that would happen, I mean, you're talking about maybe an hour or so. Often it's less. It's very, very strong and very, very intense time for that planet. You make a talisman at that time, you're really able to sort of capture that moment. And to create, you can think of it, like I said, if you're embodying the planet, you're thinking of talisman as very, very, it's a lure, as Ficino says. It's very, very attractive for them to inhabit that. It's one way of looking, or just it connects. I mean, you've got the celestial factors are happening at that point. You're freezing them. You're able to connect into that spirit using the talisman. That's the sort of underlying view of what the talisman is, and what you do with it in a devotional approach. And like I said, it's the devotional approach is also less focused on immediate effects, less focused on getting exactly what I want right now. And that this whole sort of paradoxical thing of like, if you don't focus on effects, in the longer run, you're going to have better effects. And also there's a tendency in terms of the effects to think of like, okay, how can I force the external world to conform to my wishes? If you wanted love, I would go out and get me a girlfriend. That's what I'm telling the talisman, their spirit to do. Make X be my boyfriend, get him back to me. Whereas with the love talisman, again, you could be Venus or Andromeda, 26th mansion of the moon. A lot of times the effect is going to be internal. It's going to make you a more loving person, more capable of love. Also, you're going to see effects, and this is very typical of people with, let's say, with a Venus talisman, that you're more attractive to people that you wish to attract. You're more socially adept, you're more confident, as opposed to, snap my fingers and okay, I've automatically, like I said, got this relationship, or this person's going to come running back to me. As I said, it's possible. Talismans are high intensity because of all the factors that come together in the making. You can do low intensity, but it's repeated action. So it's not to say it's any less powerful. It's not happening. It's happening regularly, as opposed to the high intensity, which those factors are only going to line up every so often. So you can only if you insisted on having, okay, I'm only going to have a high intensity in interaction, you're not going to be able to do it very often. Typically the way with talismans that I would make them is to have all these factors in place for the creation of the talisman, but then at the subsequent consecration of them, the consecration then is an opportunity for you to interact yourself with them. All of Renaissance Astrology talismans are consecrated when they're made to make that connection, to call the spirit into the talisman. When you get the talisman, you get instructions as far as doing a consecration ritual yourself. And that consecration ritual is very straightforward. You typically would want to burn a candle, burn incense, and then you do short invocation of the planet, fixed star, whatever you're dealing with, at an astrologically appropriate time. And again, this is typically more low intensity. So rather than having multiple factors for the consecration after the creation, what I would recommend would be, say, for planetary talisman, just planetary hour. For fixed star, just the fixed star rising or culminating. The more factors you throw in, the less often you're going to be able to do it. And it's you think about friendship. If you have a friend and you only do really high intensity stuff with them, and you only do it, once a year, is that going to be a stronger relationship than something, you just go and hang out with them or you take a walk or something, but you do it every week? You might actually be better off with doing a low intensity but more regular relationship in terms of building up the relationship. So again, these are things to think about. More isn't always better. More power, more intensity, whatever. And so again, with the consecrations, it's like I said, it's very practical. Now, again, when people get really freaked out, they're like, oh, if there's the slightest thing wrong, it's going to blow up in your face. That's not a devotional approach. Okay, I mean, the devotional approach, we're dealing with angels, and so again, really the focus is on respect and not just on sort of strict rules. And if you break the rules, you're going to blow your head off. I mean, it just makes sense. It's sort of like if you're dealing with angels, it's a bit like I said. I did a novena to the Virgin of Guadalupe, and I was supposed to do it, whatever, 9 times. I only did 8. Okay, she's going to come and rip my head off. She's going to be really mad at me and be freaked out. It's like that just doesn't make any sense at all when you think about that being. It's a very benign, and that's what I said. About the angels, the celestial angels, is that we're interfacing with the celestials in a very particular way. Only with angels, only with the benefic interface of those. And so the advantage to that really is the minimal blowback. I mean, and there's this idea that they're going to do what's best for you. And I've seen magicians just kind of, oh, that's ridiculous. I want what I want now. And so they end up dealing with demons. And the promise there is you're going to get what you want, but the other problem with it is blowback and having negative effects or having it be tricky. And so again, it's your choice. But getting exactly what I want right now may not be the best thing. If you think of that from the perspective of a child, I want to eat 50 cookies right now, or for perspective of an alcoholic, I want to get drunk right now, and someone stopping me is obviously an evil person. Well, that's from that perspective. And it's people are a little insulted by that. Like, I know what's best for me. It's like, really, do you? I'm kind of happy to turn it over to the angels and to allow them to come to the effects. And I have to say that, again, over the long run, I've had incredible positive effects from my interaction with celestials. So again, I'm not really making a sales pitch for the devotional approach, but I'm just pointing out that it is an alternative and it resonates with a certain number of people, and this is certainly a way to go. So if you take it that way, then the logic of what your practice is really flows from your assumptions. And I always prefer to be conscious of what my assumptions are. So again, with the devotional approach, really the focus is on respect rather than on strict rules, and that the breaking the rules are going to have some horrible consequences. I mean, people come and say, should I put the candles on the right side or the left side? Should I use blue candles or purple candles? And they're really nervous and they're really afraid they're going to make a mistake. It's like, really, this is not the sort of thing you need to worry that much about. The more you do this, you're going to get a sense for it. And what I would say about that is that while the devotional approach is flexible, that you don't have strict rules, you also need to be respectful. It's not just anything goes. And a good example of that is every so often I get people that contact me and they're like, I got this talisman and I want to, bore into it and put diamonds into it. I'm going to put holes in it and have my jeweler stick diamonds into it. Or, recently somebody was like, I made this talisman and I don't think I cut the lines properly. I want to go back and recut it because my wife doesn't think it looks right. Now, a lot of this comes from the fact that because a talisman is a pendant, people tend to think of it as jewelry. And so the purpose of jewelry is adornment. That's all it's for. And it's supposed to look nice. And so if it doesn't look nice, it's not fulfilling its primary function. It's useless, And the fact that the talisman is in the form of a pendant, I mean, talismans can be anything. I mean, like I said, mirrors, you think of the Excalibur, essentially was a talisman. Gardens, houses, an entire city. I mean, anything that can take on its final form at a particular time can be a talisman. So the fact that it's jewelry, it doesn't, that's in a sense a little bit of a coincidence. And so the shape of it, its purpose of a talisman is not to look good. And if you look at Picatrix, the Pingree Latin edition of it, in the back of it, they have a bunch of illustrations from a manuscript, and they look like cartoons. They're ridiculous. But I'm sure they were, highly effective as a talisman, because it doesn't need to be artistically beautiful. It's nice. That's a bonus. but it's not the primary function of the talisman. The primary function of the talisman is to be a sacred object. And so this idea that, well, I'm going to bore into it and change it, it just makes me nervous. Like I said, I mean, I think you've got two problems. One is that the whole point of the talisman is it takes on its final form at the elected time and you consecrate it. So you change it afterwards, you're messing with that. Second of all, there's practical problems. It's like, oh, I'm going to drill into it. It's like, you're going to mess it up. And you're going to ruin the talisman. Why would you want to take that chance? I mean, a lot of times people have, they're not jewelers. They haven't dealt with that. They have no idea of the practical problems. They just have some kind of fantasy about, oh, I wish it would look this way, so I'm going to mess with it and make it do that way. Again, that I don't really recommend that. So again, it's not anything goes. It's not like, oh, whatever you want to do, it's no problem. Respect, And if you think about it, you had an uncle that gave you a really expensive, like a Rolex or something, an Oyster, and this beautiful watch, and you're like, oh, well, I decided, drill a couple holes in it. That would, not probably be a very good idea. I guess I would say the same thing about people trying to put oils on it and stuff. I mean, oh, magically put oils on it. I mean, you're talking about this metal that can react to it. I mean, even just getting the oil off of it is like afterwards is like, it's all messed up, it's dirty, it's sticky. It's like, oh, why would you want to do that? Same thing with using really caustic cleaners, acids or something like that. I mean, what I would say is don't get it dirty in the first place as much as you can, and just be careful not to damage it. I mean, talismans, like I said, ours are made out of bronze. It's a pretty resilient material, but there's only so much abuse it can take, and I don't know why you would want to be abusing the talisman to the point where you'd be causing the damage. Be careful with it. And so it's the same thing with the wearing of the talisman. Again, like I said, it's just like something everybody knows. You got to wear it all the time, and I'm not sure exactly, and I never really got a rationale for that. Everybody knows it, and you just got to do it, and if you don't, terrible things are going to happen. As far as usually go with it. Like I said, it seems to come from the radiating energy, the battery idea. But people insist that, oh, you should wear it next to your skin, you should wear it in the shower, do I have to wear it when I'm asleep? I mean, whatever. I mean, if this is your approach, but in a devotional approach, really, if you want to wear it, you can, but it's just not necessary. It's not like it's not going to it's going to be inoperative if you don't wear it. I keep most of my talismans on altars. You can keep it in a box, its own space, in a silk pouch if you want to carry it. That's nice too. Store it respectfully. Again, expensive watch. If you had an expensive watch, what would you do with it? You wouldn't leave it on the ground. You wouldn't throw it in the dirt. You wouldn't let your dog chew on it. You'd take care of it. You'd keep it clean. You make sure it wasn't getting scratched. You wouldn't get it all greasy. Maybe you wouldn't sweat all over it. I don't know. I mean, this is just one of those things. And again, it's the practical considerations. I mean, if you're going to get it all sweaty and tarnished, then people are like, oh, I will have to wear it next to my skin, but it's causing an allergic reaction. What do I do? I'm like, don't wear it. Or if you're going to have it with you, just carry it. That's just a practical thing. You can also lose it or get damaged. I mean, people will talk about wanting to put multiple talismans together, and they're banging together, they're scratching each other. I had somebody the other day say, I want to bind them together, and I'm like, yeah, because there's a lot of magic that has to do with you make two talismans at these elected times, like for example for love, and you bind the talismans together, or for hatred too. And so there's a magical quality to that close contact. There's also the sense with the talismans, that astrological talismans, that they get along in the heavens. I think they get along. I mean, I have not seen problems as far as people having multiple talismans, but what I always recommend is that you give them a little bit of extra space. I mean, they have their own box, for example. Typically, when you're getting a talisman from Renaissance Astrology, you get a postcard size meditation image. I like to stick those up on the wall, like next to a bookshelf, and have a kind of a mini altar. So all my talismans have their own little space. I mean, they might be next to each other, but they're not like bound together or whatever. They're not, that seems to me to be, again, I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying I get a little uncomfortable with it from a respect standpoint. Again, not from the standpoint of like, oh, if you do that, then your head's going to explode. It's respect. So, nevertheless, again, another thing people get freaked out about is that people will email me and they'll be like, my talisman, it's turning black, and there's like, is it a bad omen? Am I cursed? And it's like, no, it's called tarnish. Okay, this is a natural reaction of most every metal with the air and with water. And if you're in an area with a lot of pollution, you're going to have more tarnish. It just happens. And nothing to get freaked out about, nothing to get upset about. It's not a bad omen. What we use for talismans to clean them is what's called a sunshine cloth. And these sort of, I'm not sure exactly what the material is. It's sort of like a cotton or something. It's impregnated with a kind of a cleaning solution. But it's very mild, and you just sort of scrub the talisman with it. It takes off the tarnish really nicely. That's what we use. You can shine them up. It's nice to have your talismans shined up. They look nice. Again, respectful. Another problem people have is we have chains. I mean, chains are a real problem. I mean, we have these chains that we use. They're a little thin, and they will break from time to time. Which, I mean, again, I'm constantly trying to look around for better ones or whatever, but that's the way it goes. But the chain, again, people get really freaked out about that. Like, again, my chain broke, and should I throw the talisman away? And I'm freaked out. It's like, no, just, and again, same thing if you want to switch chains. I mean, if you're like, oh, it's causing my neck to go green, okay, put it on a cord, on a silk cord or something, or, get a leather cord or get a gold chain or something like that. No problem, because the chain is just a practical way to help wear the talisman. It's not magical. It's not connected or anything like that. It's also not like a bad omen or something just because there's a problem with it. Stuff happens. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a disaster. And again, like if you said, if you've got a talisman, you're like, I'd really like to put it on this other chain. Go for it. That's perfectly fine. It's really a practical consideration. And it's also kind of, if you bought a nice chain for it, like that's kind of respectful too. That's a nice thing to do. Ultimately, again, just my take on as we're going through this. So the next thing, like I mentioned in the consecration, candles and incense. And so incense is, again, like there's not strict rules, but suffumigation, which is, when you burn the incense, there's smoke coming up and you move the talisman back and forth through the smoke, is a pretty important part of a lot of traditional sources. I mean, the suffumigation is something that, Picatrix mentions, Agrippa mentions, it's a big deal. There's also the sort of sense of a sacrifice here. I mean, you're not sacrificing anything alive. It's just like incense and the burning of the candle, really. But that's an important part of the invocation. If you start throwing all that stuff out, you're really left with nothing. You're left there just kind of muttering to the planet. So that it really does, I think, you don't have to have some totally elaborate thing, but the candles and incense are kind of the minimum. One candle, one thing of incense. I also, like if I'm doing this, super low intensity stuff like daily planetary practice, sometimes I'll just use candles, but that's really kind of the minimum that I use. I use white votive candles. I'll just show you. This is, example. I've got like 6 of them at a time going. I'm doing lots and lots of magic. So they're in the votive holders. Just use white votive candles. And then when I've got them up on the altar, they're also on top of it. This is a tempered glass, candle holder. So it's a really, I think it's a big safety thing. I mean, votives are better than the regular candles because they're not going to melt and fall over and cause a fire or something. I mean, votives just melt inside the votive holder. They're also sitting on top of these tempered glass. So if for some reason there was some crack or something, they'll occasionally crack from the heat. Then they're still sitting on top of the tempered glass, so it's protection there. The other thing with the candles is people say, should I let them burn down all the way? I'm like, safety first, okay? It's like, don't leave candle. Oh my God, I had to, for magical purpose, I had to leave them unattended, so and I had to leave the house, and my house burned down. It's like, do not leave a flame unattended. I mean, so many people, have, burn their house down or burn their apartment down or whatever from candles. I'm completely, totally obsessed with making sure that the candles are out, and I do an evening, was when I do my daily planetary practice, and I like repeatedly like OCD checking to make sure that, I'm sticking my finger in there to make sure that flame as I look. And like I said, very, very obsessed about making sure that, because I've had times when I've got up in the middle of the night and the candle was burning in the middle of the night, and that just freaks me out. It's like, I do not want that to happen. So like I said, I'm very much obsessed with fire safety. So do not in any way, shape, or form compromise your safety for some, mythical, magical idea that they need to be burning all the time or burning down or whatever. I wouldn't. It's just crazy. So like I said, I use white candles for, I think that's a good neutral color. I use white candles for everything. Um, I mean, certainly you can use colors if you want to. I mean, but then people get into a panic like the fixed stars. It's like, oh, there's no set color. What do I do? I'm freaking out. It's like, it's just not a huge deal. The planets, even with them, it's like, obviously black for Saturn, red for Mars, sort of a orange or yellow for the sun. But then it can get a little, honky, like Jupiter, blue, purple, green, blah, blah, blah. Can be confusing. Venus, white, green, pink, which is the right one? It's like, that's fine. Don't freak out about it. I mean, you're not going to use black for Venus, right? That's inappropriate. But, again, it's not like there's a one right way to do it. So incense, the other thing about incense is that what will happen is that people are like, okay, I can't get the specific incense that it calls for in this particular source, so I'm not going to do anything at all. I mean, and this to me is a bit like you have a friend, he comes over to visit you, he's really thirsty, and you know he likes some particular drink. You don't have that particular drink, so you freak out and you don't give him anything. So I don't even give him a glass of water. I'm like, come on, give him a glass of water. I mean, that's what I would say about incense, is at least do some kind of incense. Personally, what I use is this Japanese temple stick incense. It's called a Ryoko. This is just like a sandalwood incense. This is a small box of it. I'm going to put the link in there in case people for some reason want to use it. I mean, this is just from my Soto Zen, lineage. That's what they use for Zen ritual. And so I was very comfortable with it, and I have stuff, and I've just started, that's just what I end up using for everything. Um, Again, I'm weirdly enough not coming from well, this is the only instance you have, this is the best, and everyone has to use it or your head's going to explode. It's like, this is just what I use, and if you're stuck and you don't know what to do, that's fine. I mean, pretty much any sort of basic stick incense is going to be fine. The other thing that I have been recommending for a long time is frankincense, just as a general incense. I think it's solar. It's, I forget which other planets it is, but that's what I said, just use that in general. It's funny because we, in the quadripartitous variant of Hermes on the 15 fixed stars, and we published our recent translation of De Quindecim Stellis, Mashallah lists general types of incense for benefic purposes. Rather than saying for each star what to use, he just says if you're going to do benefic, here's like 10 different kinds of incense that you can use. And frankincense was one of the ones he listed, which I thought was really cool. My intuition was in accordance with the traditional sources. That's when you're really kind of, grooving on the essence, is that when you're like, that's what seems right to me, and then you have a traditional source, verify it. Now the traditional sources, we're talking about Agrippa, Picatrix, a lot of our traditional sources will actually list specific incenses for planets. I mean, there'll be maybe some like Picatrix has like 10 different things you put together. And again, some of them are unsavory, like animal parts or whatever. I'm like, I'm not doing that. And also like Saturn, stuff that stinks. I'm like, no, I'm not doing this. I mean, pine, okay, that's good. That's a good compromise. It doesn't stink. There's also incense listed for Mansions of the Moon, for decant faces. You can use the traditional rulership of herbs and plants, for planets, fixed stars, whatever. These can all be used as incense. I mean, if it's like, for example, Algol rules mugwort, which is an herb, anything like that, what you're going to have to do is get an incense burner, incense charcoal, you need incense tongs, you light the charcoal, get the charcoal going, and then you sprinkle like, again, same with resin incense too, like frankincense or something like that, you need to put it onto the charcoal. Kind of a pain, kind of a hassle. I mean, if for a major ritual, maybe it's okay. But, for me, I'd like the stick incense is so much easier to use. And again, you don't need to get freaked out about not having a specific incense. It's better to use some kind of, a general incense than nothing at all. And so another issue with incense is, it seems like the standard modern magical approach to incense is you just got to have freaking clouds of it everywhere. Like it's so much smoke you can't even see. I mean, I can't take that much smoke. I mean, I'm not technically allergic to it, but that's too much for me. What I'm using is, if you think about, this is a short stick. This is a bundle of them, short stick of the incense. And what I'm using for the typical invocation, as you can see, that is like, that's like two inches of it, 3 inches maybe of it. It's like a really small little piece. We stick it in this comes with the typical stick incense. not the this style, but a typical stick incense you buy in a store will have this little incense burner. That's what I use. And so I'm using a very small amount. I mean, there's people that can't even take that. So the other thing that you can do is you can do like a water incense or a flower incense, food offerings. And that I've always been kind of a little not sure how to deal with that stuff because of the disposal issue. So with the food, basically, and sort of had some guidance on this recently from somebody who consulted the celestial angels, was with food offerings that you would eat it yourself and otherwise then respectfully dispose of it. The other thing you do with food offerings is you can, if it's not a huge amount of it, it's not going to attract rats or whatever, you can put it out for birds or whatever, but don't be, again, practical. Don't be putting a huge amount out there so it's rotting. Don't be attracting vermin or whatever. Flowers, again, you can put them out in a natural area after you dispose of them. But essentially with the offerings of those, you just put them on the altar before you do the invocation, and then, again, as an offering to the spirits. And they're getting the spiritual essence of them. That's why you can they can give them the spiritual essence and then you can eat it. It's in the Hindu, it's a prasad. I mean, it's a sense as a blessings of the spirit that have come with it. So that's another possibility. I'm still working on that. It's not something I do regularly, but that's another possibility, particularly if you've got to the point where you can't handle incense, or you're in a situation where there's fire hazard, you're not allowed to, in a dorm or something, you're not allowed to have incense. If you can't even do candles, though, that's starting to get kind of bare bones. But again, you just got to work with the situation that you're in. And so I think that the bottom line then is that, understanding your sort of unconscious assumptions about what a talisman is and what kind of spirits you're actually dealing with, that helps you understand what your automatic assumptions are and what's going to appeal to you or not appeal to you. And I always prefer to be conscious of what's manifesting through me as opposed to being unconscious about it. And so I certainly wouldn't want to say, again, that atheistic materialism is wrong, or that the battery approach to talisman is wrong, or that it's wrong to wear the talisman next to your skin 24 hours a day. But that's coming from a particular approach and with particular assumptions. And there are alternatives. And the devotional approach is, again, it's not for everybody. It's not going to be something that's going to resonate with everybody. But for those that it does resonate for, you can understand, the practical implications of it in terms of, whether, again, not being worried about stuff so much, being flexible, but also, being respectful. And ultimately then the purpose is, like I said, is friendship. And that's kind of the metaphor that I use in a lot of things. And how would you treat a friend? Someone you're respectful, not someone that you're messing with, but someone you're respectful of. Maybe an older friend, maybe a friend who's a judge or something, and you want to have a respectful attitude, but be friendly with them and let that kind of flow throughout all your interactions. And then that helps you with the practical, issues that come up. So I hope that's useful. Again, I think it's, again, this is my approach. There's other ways to go about it. I'm not saying it's wrong or right and you have to do my way and the other ways are wrong. But it is useful to see these alternatives, and I think it's useful to see the underlying, philosophy, methodology, and then how that plays itself out in practice. So again, hope you find that useful, and I look forward to doing more videos on talismans and both the practical and theoretical aspects.